Good afternoon. So I have the great pleasure of going between AI, kids, and Baron Davis. But on a serious note, I live in Los Angeles, so it is just great to see the youth doing things that are so important, using the tools that they have best. It was a terrible, terrible tragedy, and to see people using crypto, other technologies to make change and make this world a better place is both great for the situation in Los Angeles, but also very important when we think about how we need to shape our future. So, before we begin, I am Jay Lundy, and let me quickly tell you a bit about myself. I am the managing director of NAACP Capital, which we'll talk about, but when I think about who I am, I'm kind of like a good impact investing portfolio. I've got a diversified, impact-driven career that's always focused on looking ahead about what's the next thing. I grew up in Florida to a household of 7 kids. Yes, 7 kids, which taught me early on about teamwork, about negotiation, and empathy. My parents were deeply socially and civically engaged, and they taught me that community matters, and things start at the ground level. And trust me, when you grow up in a household with 6 siblings, you learn very early on how to figure out what's right and what's wrong. And I started my career as a teacher. I taught 6th, 9th, and 10th grade at a public school in New York City with 0 training with Teach for America and had to deal with all types of stuff, which taught me how to engage with different stakeholders, but also deal with all types of crowds. After that, I spent 6 years lasting at BCG, the Boston Consulting Group, as a consultant, and from there went on to lead investing work for a couple of big family offices. And today, I'm proud to lead NAACP Capital and our efforts to rewire power and the dynamics of venture capital. And our purpose is really to think about how do we change and transform cultural institutions into engines of inclusive capitalism. So with that, I'll jump into talking about what NAACP Capital is. And this is typically the part where people get really, really confused. They think about the NAACP, this historic organization, starting a venture capital fund. And I'm sure, with the lights, I can't see everyone. I'm sure there's some confused faces about what is this guy talking about? So I'll get into that in a minute, but first I want to tell you a little bit about what we're actually doing. So when you think about our strategy, we're going to be a fund to fund, which means that we're going to invest in other venture capital funds and startups whose focus is using technology to change the world and drive positive outcomes in underinvested and overlooked communities. And one of the reasons that's so important is we've got this massive legacy, which I'll talk about, and we're going to leverage that. We're going to think about how can we use our legacy, our power, our trust to really drive change into communities. We're currently raising $200 million and building our team. And the question I get a lot is, why a fund to fund? And one of the reasons it's so key is, in this current environment, you have so many amazing fund managers who are highly talented, have tremendous experience, have great track records, but they are struggling to raise capital. And these emerging managers who have all the track records that we need can't raise a dollar, can't raise the capital they need, because 80% of the venture funding is going to the top 30 funds out there. And what's even more important, these emerging managers who have different lived experiences and backgrounds, different sector expertises, typically outperform. You can look at study after study that shows that these emerging managers in funds 1, 2, and 3 actually outperform, and they have lived experiences from all these different perspectives that allows them to also drive impact. So, not only is this strategy going to help the venture ecosystem, it's going to lead to greater returns and also help people make money, which we're all about. So, the question I get all the time is why? And this is going to get me in trouble in the Bay, but we're here near Menlo in San Francisco. So the NAACP has a 116-year existence. It's been around since 1909, started by a group of black folks, but also people who weren't considered white at the time. Jewish people, Italians, Irish, Catholics, others came together to create this amazing organization. And when I think about that history, it's a track record. And the reason that venture capitalists get pissed off is I'll say things like, our track record is actually much longer and much more nuanced and much more productive than the top decile venture capital firm out there. And the reason is we have been dealing with people, customers, businesses, B2B customers, policy, term sheets, undeniably for 116 years. And we've been able to disrupt and drive more innovation than any venture capital firm has in that 116-year history. And when you think about, that history, I go all the way back to all the things that we've been able to do. When you think about segregation, Brown versus Board of Education, in the 1950s, we paved the way for educational reform. In the same time, that paving the way for educational reform has led to the premise of some of the innovation you're seeing in education now, making sure that AI, ed tech, works for all students. A little bit later down the road, when you think about the landmark economic justice efforts, the March in Washington in the 1960s for jobs and freedom, this wasn't just about civil rights. This was about economic opportunity for everyone, which is the epicenter of some debates now about AI and workforce development and future of work. And more recently, when you think about disparities with COVID-19, you think about economic injustices and racism, we have showed that our work never ends and it continues to evolve. And to go back to the point on LA earlier, which is very personal to me, living in LA, when the wildfires devastated communities, including the communities in Altadena, it was the NAACP who stepped up to provide critical support. We organized resource fairs, guidance on housing and insurance claims, and advocated for justice on behalf of the victims. And this isn't just about protests and policy. It's about building sustainable systems and infrastructure to drive opportunity. And any investor, impact or not, should want that. Now we're bringing that same tenacity, that same strategic thinking to the world of impact investing, proving that inclusive capitalism isn't just a buzzword, it's the next chapter in our civil rights journey. So, why are we doing this? It's very simple. We want to close gaps and drive positive outcomes in communities. You've heard from the prior panels and conversations about things like education gaps and AI solving that. We heard about gaps in maternal health, especially births of color. We talked about climate disparities. These gaps are real, and they make life harder not just for the affected people, but by all people. 10 years from now, when we think about what we want to be able to achieve, it's really making sure that we can look back and see that we've had real, hard, measurable outcome change across healthcare, financial access, climate, education, and housing. And this change hasn't just been impactful for the communities that need it the most, it's actually been scalable, sustainable, and profitable. And that's what impact investing really needs to be. It's not just about writing the checks. It's about making sure that fund managers and founders and their strategies lead to the type of transformational change we need to see. So, can this work? And I always get people who ask, can you actually drive outcome change and make money and make the world a better place? I think you can. And I think it's even more important that we try to do it now. And what's really important too is the people who do it, which includes many of you in this room. We won't just bring the NAACP, our legacy, our access, and our power, but it's the trust, it's the touch, it's the transparency that communities that are going through change need the most. So I'll dive into some numbers. And when you think about just, is this thing big enough, can it work? The answer is crystal clear, yes. There are 70 million Americans right now living in this country without basic infrastructure, healthcare, economic systems, climate that works. The system is broken. When you double click, there are 65 million people of color who live in the Rust Belt, who live in southern states, and urban cores. And what's important is these, to me, are the emerging markets we talk about. These are the populations that have high growth potential, but they've been overlooked. When you think about people in rural communities, there are 30 million people in rural communities who have a lack of basic things like broadband, a lack of basic things like reliable transportation, and they don't even have access to some of the technology we talk about. Like, these are massive things that we're missing, and it's a massive gap in our system. And then when you think about suburbs, in this people moving in and out, you have 10 million people who live in suburbs that the population growth in these communities is outpacing communities' ability to develop. This is a huge opportunity. And these things collectively scream TAM, which for those in the audience who are venture capitalists, total addressable market, which is a green light for invest now. So when you think about all of this, it's simple. Closing gaps drives impact. And it's not about checking a box. It's about building an economy that includes everyone. We're here to show you that cultural institutions have both the moral authority and the practical expertise to lead this work. And closing gaps. That's how you unlock value. When you think about where potential actually lives, we have to focus on where those people live. Inclusive capitalism means creating economic flywheels in communities where they have been overlooked. And lastly, closing these gaps doesn't just fix the past. It generates sustainable engines of capital that make smart investors money, and I'll say that again, make smart investors money, and it closes wealth gaps in these communities. When cultural institutions like the NAACP step in, we're not just investing for these communities. We're investing to shape prosperity for all. And as I close, I want to think about a couple of things. We are here to rewire and rethink how the world can be. And it's going to take more than just one sector or the other. It's going to take us coming together. And at the NAACP, we are looking for partners who want to do this with us and help us make sure that when we think about the communities who need things the most, we ensure that they are built and they have the systems that can lead to long-term change. Thank you for engaging with me. I'm Jay Lundy. I lead NAACP Capital. Happy to talk to anyone about any of this at any time.